Hello, and welcome to What's Your Story? Our guest today is the author of The Adoption Paradox, Putting Adoption into Perspective. And this is a topic that we all need to be talking about in this day and age. Her name is Jean Kelly Widner, and we're very pleased to have her with us today. This book is a powerful exploration of the complex realities of adoption. And adoption is a subject that I'm very interested in knowing about. And I understand that you were born in Washington State in 1965, and you were adopted from birth. Is that correct?
More or less, yes. I was
Yeah.
about 2 months old when my parents got me.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
So you didn't ever know your other parents.
That's correct.
And so you've been familiar with adoption all your life. Now,
Mhm.
did you know from the beginning you were adopted, or did someone tell you somewhere along the way?
No, I grew up knowing. My parents got that right in that they told me, I don't know when, obviously at a very, very young age, because it's the only conscious memory that I have is the idea that I was adopted and that they were my parents by choice.
That's wonderful, isn't it?
It's the best way, that's for sure.
I think to know that you were chosen is really special.
Well, yeah, and that's sort of a misnomer, but it is nonetheless at least better than finding out much later in life.
Yes, yes. So tell us a little bit about the book.
So, The Adoption Paradox is a book exploring adoption from all different sides of what we know as adoption's triad, or what we like to call the constellation, because lots of people are affected when an adoption happens in a family for whatever reason. So, what I did is I did 3 years worth of research and also interviewed close to 100 individuals for the book. I interviewed people who were adoptees from both domestic as well as international and transracial adoptions, as well as foster care. I interviewed relinquishing birth parents, the people who had lost a child to adoption for whatever reason. And then also adoptive parents and foster parents, as well as industry professionals, mental health experts, and tried to bring a really deep dive and a good range.
Yes. So it looks like you're coming from all different sides of adoption and really exploring it. Why do you call it a paradox?
Well, because I can be glad that I was raised by the people I was raised by. I love my parents. They were good people. They did a relatively decent job raising me. I can also wonder at the losses. I can wonder at what happened to my mother and why it was that she found it necessary to relinquish me in 1965. I am denied access, for example, to my medical history. I am denied access to information about my heritage. And so in the closed adoption system, those things are prevalent. And so I can be grateful and angry at the same time.
That's interesting, isn't it? So what was the original purpose of writing the book?
The original purpose of writing the book really was to sort of explore adoption's emotional complexities from all different sides, and to really try to, as I said, do that deep dive and really wriggle around in the fact that for us as adoptees, our views change throughout life as we hit different milestones. There's the view that you have of adoption as a child, and then you start to grow, or maybe you have children of your own. That's a big milestone for a lot of people. And for an adoptee, then they're looking at maybe this child that they've just had, and they're wondering, how could I have been relinquished? What kind of heartache and what kind of reasons led to that? And so we process adoption differently throughout our lives. And that's true also for our birth parents who relinquish us or lose us to adoption. And it's true for adoptive parents as well.
It's interesting that you came into my life right at this time, because I had a big conversation with some of my art students the other day about this very subject. They were young women in their 20s and 30s, and they were talking about they didn't know if they were ever going to get married or not. And then they said, but they definitely wanted to have children. And then one of them said, well, I don't have to have my own child. I would be happy to adopt a child. I think there's a lot of children in the world that need to be adopted, and I would like to do that, she said. And I thought it was interesting because it was just on like 3 days ago that I had that conversation with these girls about whether or not they would ever get married. whether or not they were going to marry someone of the same sex, because they were into conversations about the main thing for them would be to find somebody that they could really respect, admire, and love for the rest of their life, whether they were a different color, a different ethnic group, a different sex. And we've got, it was just such an interesting conversation. And then here you are with the book. So I'm fascinated to ask you all of these questions.
Sure.
So how do you feel that your book is going to help other people who are affected by adoption?
Well, gosh, I got a letter literally this morning from a woman who was adopted and said, in your book, I'm reading it slow because I have to, and I'm feeling seen for the first time in my life.
Wow.
And so those are the kinds of stories and feedback that I'm getting from all sides of the constellation. And so I think it's a really important book. And the conversation that you were having with the students in your class, where it's a very typical conversation that happens in America, but honestly, there's the paradigm of what we think about what adoption is, and then there's the reality and the lived experience of all of us who have to wander this path, and it is different than most people think.
What's different?
Well, I think we have to go into the assumptions that people have about why an adoption is necessary. We're talking primarily first about children who are relinquished. In other words, a woman, for whatever reason, is feeling like she maybe needs to place this child. And then you also have adoption that happens from foster care. The two things have both different outcomes and also different reasons for their being. You know, the girl in your class isn't wrong in that there are children in our nation who, unfortunately, they can't be safely raised by their own natural parents for whatever reason. And certainly no one wants to see a child be in danger. We have a foster care system which does not work well. And I would always rather see a child be in a stable, single environment. You always want to try to first find other kin, other extended family members, school counselors, neighbors, friends, whatever, rather than a stranger situation.
Yes.
When you have the situation where a child is relinquished voluntarily, and I am going to put quotes on that, is our paradigm is different. So, for example, in 1965, when my mother relinquished me, she was 18 years old and she was unmarried. And that in 1965 was frowned upon, and that was not allowed to be. You couldn't be readily a single mother in our culture at that time.
Right.
My father wouldn't marry her, apparently. And so she was forced, basically. There was no other choice.
Yes.
And so that's the paradigm that we still view adoption through, is a young girl in trouble kind of thing. But in my research, what I learned is, like, for example, the average age that a woman is relinquishing a child in America is 26.
Really?
58% of those women are already parenting.
That is interesting.
20 to 25% are married. And the number one reason why they're relinquishing is financial. And so that's a very different picture to have to face then. And so those stories are very different. They're not what you think. And so this is the work that we have to do. And that's why I feel like my book is necessary.
It sounds like it. So what surprised you the most when you were writing and researching the book?
Definitely the idea, what I just laid out for sure, that our paradigm is wrong. One of the other unfortunate things that really did surprise me that I had to kind of come to terms with within my own story as an adopted individual. In America, we have a for-profit business model of adoption. In other words, you have for-profit attorneys, for-profit agencies who operate right alongside nonprofits. And if you, again, walk that back to the paradigm that I just laid out to you, if the number one reason why an expectant parent, be they an individual or a couple, is looking at relinquishing their child, if the number one reason is finances, and then another business is actually profiting from that, right? That's squishy.
That's an interesting word.
It's morally uncomfortable, though, isn't it?
Yes.
And so those are the problems. And again, not to fault adoptive parents. Adoptive parents didn't set up the situation. They just have to function within it. And so I sort of feel like, and I think that's what my research and my stories show is that everyone is sort of being taken advantage of. I feel terrible for couples who cannot conceive naturally, or queer couples where, okay, the plumbing isn't there, so they have only certain options, adoption, surrogacy, or, donor conception. So I want to support people becoming parents, and I want to support them becoming parents naturally, however they can. But if you're going to wander through the doors of adoption, you need to understand that there's more to this story.
It evidently is a lot more to this story, a lot more. So what touched you the most? What made you feel?
I saw so much bravery. I saw so many people who were willing to look at their loss and to own the choices that they made. So many people who were willing to extend grace to each other despite mistakes that they had made. So many triumphant stories that, came out of foster care. I interviewed some amazing, both foster care and adoptive parents. I interviewed some incredible birth parents who got stuck into sometimes a situation where relinquishment was necessary, or they were a part of what we call the baby scoop era, which is that era between World War II and 1973, when more relinquishments happened than any time.
Really?
Yes,
that
in
was
history.
The period.
Yes.
And why was that particular period where the most happened?
You had a lot of reasons. You had a cultural sort of evolution, and that, couples were dating. They were dating more modernly. You didn't have a lot of birth control access or education. So you didn't have a lot of information or access to the best way to prevent pregnancy. And you had, yes, a more permissive culture that had come into being. And then you didn't have other choices that were available to you, like keeping your child, unless you got married, which is what, of course, the majority of those situations ended with a marriage rather than a relinquishment. But if somebody wouldn't marry you, that woman was really given no choice.
Yes.
So that's why you had more of them than at any other time in history. So you had a lot of women who had to really piece themselves back together, and a lot of men, a lot of loss in birth fathers as well. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they didn't know. Other times they were just simply completely shut out of the process.
It's interesting that you say this, because my sister fell in those years, mm-hmm. and she did become pregnant when she was not married. And my mother actually picked up the whole family and moved us to another place so that my sister would not give up her child, so that she would be able to have an apartment of her own with some story that was made up about the husband being away at war or whatever. And she kept the child. And I just found it, at that time I was young, and I found it so fascinating that we had to change my whole life because my sister didn't know how to behave, you see. And so it's interesting that these situations happen, and they're individual. They're all so individual. So many people have different ways. It turned out that my sister's partner was married to someone else. Oops. And so, that kept him from being able to marry her. And but my mother was bound and determined, we're not giving up that child, and in a way, I've always wondered, was it best? Was it best for everybody concerned? But it was what it was.
Right.
And my mom made sure everything went well and the child was well taken care of. And my sister eventually remarried, and her husband adopted the child.
Yeah.
And
the thing that we say in adoption land is sort of that adoption doesn't guarantee you a better life. It does give you a different life. And so, but it isn't necessarily better, but it is always different. And kudos to your mom.
Yeah, she was bound and determined we were keeping that child. And it's interesting because I wasn't that much older than than that little girl. And as we grew up, we sort of grew up together. So I always thought she was very special because she was like having a little sister.
That's nice. Mhm.
But I was mad at her that I had to change schools.
Sure.
What pleases you the most about the end result of an adoption?
About of an adoption or the book?
Both.
What pleases me the most about an adoption is if a child really cannot be raised by their own natural parents and there is no extended kin and they were genuinely unsafe, to have a child who is welcomed into a home, who can heal from their separation wounds, who can heal from whatever may have been happening in their home, if they're loved, if they're actually cared for with an awareness, I think, from their adoptive parents, because that's one of the ironies, is that love is not enough. You cannot love away trauma. You cannot love away separation trauma. You cannot love away something that maybe a child went through in their home. It's a good place to start, which is a quote I share in my book. It's a good place to start, but it in and of itself is not sufficient. And so what we need are adoptive parents who are really, really aware of these truths and who are willing to show up and get into the trenches and go for counseling and have their kids receive the attention that they deserve and be given honest support that feels authentic to them.
That's so important.
Mhm.
So important. And are you pleased with the end result of the book?
Very much so. I mean, I'm already getting emails from people. I'm getting that feedback from people, and you can't beat that. And I think I've done something in that I've modernized this conversation. That's one of the other things that folks who have been in and around the adoption community are saying to me, that I've modernized the narrative. I've brought us to 2025. We're now going to talk about adoption in a modern way, not a teenage girl in trouble, like
Yes.
I was born in, that we need to talk about this now and its impacts now.
We certainly do. Why should the larger public care about what seems to be a relatively isolated, familiar, or social issue?
Well, here's the thing. There's roughly 5 million adopted individuals right now here in the US, okay? We have 2 sets of parents on either side of us and their extended family. That doesn't even count what happens in foster care every single year. Right now in foster care, there's about 370 children in our foster care system. Roughly 25,000 of them age out every year. You have roughly 50 to 60,000 adoptions that happen from within foster care, and then another 50,000 that happen through step-parent adoption and that kind of thing, which I've even had people who were adopted through a stepchild situation, which that isn't even necessarily something I specifically address in the book, but I've had people from that side even reach out to me and say, you know what, this is speaking to me.
Yes.
So, there's a statistic out there that says adjacently, there's 100,000 people in our country that are impacted by adoption somewhere within their extended family. And so people should care because, foster care impacts our society greatly. And if we're not going to be honest about the things that go wrong in that system and need to be addressed in that system, we all pay for it. The statistic that I see now is that 2 out of every 3 young adults who emerge from the foster care system end up either incarcerated or homeless. That's a terrible social drain.
2 out of every 3?
2 out of every 3. So that is a terrible social drain. And say for those of us who are adoptees, well, adoptees attempt or commit suicide 4 times more frequently than the general population. We significantly overrepresent in addiction statistics. We significantly overrepresent with issues regarding trust and intimacy and attachment and things like that have affected us. And so if we're not going to be honest about all that adoption can cost everybody involved, we're missing a huge impact actually in our society.
What can we do about it?
Start by learning about it. Start by talking honestly about it. And hopefully start to make some changes.
Well, I think I need to start with reading the book.
Thank you.
I'm so impressed with your knowledge and with your statistics. I mean, I'd never even imagined that the numbers that you're quoting here are even believable. I mean, they're so huge.
Yeah, I mean, there's more impact than you think. I mean, when I first started writing the book and coming up with, my outline and my premise and all of the things, people would say, well, what do you think your market is for that? And I'd say, well, let's see. For starters, we got 5 million adoptees, and again, I don't think our constellation is seen and fully understood by our society. I think adoptive parents struggle more than people understand. I know fosters are. I know and have seen a lot of the pain that people who've lost a child to adoption, what they look like, the shoes they have to try to fill for the rest of their lives, because people either hero worship them, like, oh, you did such a brave and noble thing. Oh, but I could never do that. Mm-hmm. That is just a no man's land of human judgment and admiration that really doesn't fit for them at all.
No.
So many of them, that's what I heard from, the men and women that I interviewed, is people just don't understand them, and the adoptees are in their center going, hey, actually, this is all supposed to be for my welfare. It's all supposed to be about me. And it's not. Is the hard truth. Everyone else is motivating the entire thing. So,
wow, the reality is amazing.
Yeah,
that is different. Amazing. So you are working with Jo Wilkins
Yes.
at Mystic Publishing. She published your book. How did you meet her? How did that come about?
The Henderson Writers Group, need to give a shout out for that, which is an organization that she started, and so glad for joining that group early on in my writing journey. And I mean, she heard me read, by her I mean Jo Wilkins heard me read some early drafts that, I look at now and I think, boy, that was rough. But even back then, she said, there's something here.
Yes.
So, she saw that. And so when it came time, we had a chat. And here we are.
Here we are. Let's look at your book. Let's show it to everybody, because it's, I know we'll have the picture up, but at the same time, I kind of want people to see it. Can you kind of tilt it a little bit so that we don't get so much light?
The other way. There we go. There we
go. Okay. It's a beautiful book.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful book. It's a big book. You did a lot of research.
Yeah, we're 450 pages. I'm sorry, it's a tome. But people tell me actually it goes fast. Like once you get into it, it goes fast.
Well, it's so interesting. I mean, just our conversation right here, I'm just stunned with all the things I've heard, and I'm thinking, did I really learn it? No, I didn't learn it. I heard it, but I haven't learned it. I've got to go back and read it to incorporate that into my being, so I understand, because there's so much you brought up that I'm just going, whoa.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider here. There really is. So, and there's just for all of the reasons that I laid out, it's timely and important.
So where can someone get your book?
So they can go to my website at adoptionparadox.com or on Amazon.
On Amazon. I love Amazon. We can all get books there.
There we go.
And this Sunday, we're doing a book fair.
Yeah, it's a book fair and signing.
Yeah, and so we'll be doing that up at Charleston Peak, the retreat at Charleston Peak, and you'll be there. So hopefully some people will see this before Sunday and get up there to see you and know that they can get the book direct from you at that. But we have other events coming up as well this year.
Yes.
So we'll make sure they get to know that they're happening, so they can come and meet you there.
Wonderful.
I really want to thank you for being a guest and for bringing this very important subject to the attention of the public, because I think it's something we all need to know and to care about.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Well, you're a wonderful guest, and you're so full of great information. And thank you for being with us today. We really appreciate that you are here today. And if you have any questions, how can they reach you if they want to? If they want to ask you some questions.
Sure, absolutely. I really love to hear from people. You can go to my website at adoptionparadox.com and then use the contact us form, or Jean@adoptionparadox.com.
Wonderful. Thank you. So now you know where to reach Jean. And I think this is an important subject that we all need to further explore. So check it out, and you can get your copy on Amazon or direct from Jean. And thank you for being with us today.